The dark truth about demonic vibration powering dark chosen ones. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to have immense power, magnetic presence, and unshakable influence, yet when you look deeper, their energy doesn't feel pure? There's a reason for that. And today, we're going to explore something most people are too afraid to even whisper about: the hidden force that empowers what I call the dark chosen ones. This is not just metaphor, not just myth. This is real, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. We're not talking about fairy tale demons or cartoonish evil. No, what we're diving into is far more subtle, far more dangerous. It's spiritual energy distorted, inverted, and weaponized. It's the vibration of manipulation, seduction, dominance, and illusion. And it's everywhere. The dark chosen ones are not necessarily evil in the way society defines evil. In fact, many of them are celebrated. They are influencers, leaders, artists, and healers. Yes, healers. Because even healing can be twisted when the source of the power is corrupted. And that's what we're going to unravel. Not to judge, not to demonize, but to understand. Because without understanding, you are vulnerable. And you don't want to be vulnerable to this.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Let's start with vibration. Everything is vibration. Everything. Your thoughts vibrate. Your emotions vibrate. Your body vibrates. And most importantly, your intentions vibrate. Now, think about this. What happens when your intentions are rooted in fear, in lack, in ego, in desire to control? That's when the vibration shifts. That's when a person begins to open themselves to the darker frequencies of the universe. These frequencies are not bad in the moral sense. They are destructive in the energetic sense. They separate rather than unify. They devour rather than nourish. And yet they are powerful, extremely powerful. The dark chosen ones are those who have learned consciously or unconsciously to tap into these vibrations. They don't get their power by aligning with the divine. They get it by aligning with distortion. They feed off attention, off chaos, off fear, off desire. They walk into a room and everyone feels them, but what people feel is not peace, it's gravity. It's pull. It's intoxicating. It's hypnotic. And that's the secret. Their power lies in manipulation of vibration. They don't need to speak to control. They just need to be. But how does this happen? How does someone become a dark chosen one? It usually begins in pain. Deep pain, trauma, neglect, rejection, isolation. And the soul fractures, and in that fracture, something enters. A frequency, a whisper, a hunger, and instead of healing the wound, the person begins to identify with the wound. They make it their power source. Their pain becomes their fuel. Their rage becomes their fire. And the universe responds. Because the universe doesn't judge. It simply amplifies what you are. And here's the terrifying part: this dark power works. It works very well. It can bring fame, money, influence, seduction, dominance. It can turn someone into a magnet for whatever they desire, but at a cost, always at a cost, because the more they feed on that power, the more it feeds on them. It's a feedback loop, a spiral. They become less and less human, more and more vessel, and eventually they forget who they are. They believe they are the power, when in truth they are just a host. Now, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Have you ever felt a temptation to control rather than love? To dominate rather than uplift? To take rather than give? That's not weakness. That's the fork in the road. That's the moment where you either awaken or descend. We all have that moment, every single one of us. The difference is, most people don't even recognize it when it comes. But if you're hearing this now, it means you are ready to see. You are ready to choose. You see, the reason we must understand the dark chosen ones is not just to protect ourselves from them, it's to recognize the shadow in ourselves. Because the truth is, we are all capable of being chosen by the dark. The ego loves to be special. It loves to be powerful. It loves to be feared. And the dark vibration knows this. It whispers exactly what the ego wants to hear. You are better. You are above. You deserve this. They don't understand you. They are jealous. Take what's yours, and if you listen long enough, you start to believe it. But here's the deeper truth. The dark chosen ones are not evil. They are lost. They are hurting. They are fractured souls who never found their way back. And the longer they stay in that vibration, the harder it is to return, because the vibration becomes their identity. And once your identity is fused with distortion, truth feels like an attack. Light feels like a threat. They begin to see love as weakness, compassion as stupidity, humility as failure. And that's when they become dangerous, not because they are powerful, but because they are blind. You must understand this. Vibration is not just energy. It's perception. When your vibration changes, your entire worldview changes. What you see, what you feel, what you attract, it all shifts. So, if a person is vibrating in fear, they will see enemies everywhere. If they vibrate in desire, they will see everything as something to possess. If they vibrate in power, they will see everyone as something to control. And that's the prison. That's the trap. Because the vibration becomes the lens, and the lens becomes the world. So what do we do? How do we protect ourselves? It starts with awareness. Always awareness. You must become a master of your own energy. You must feel your own vibration every single day. Ask yourself, what am I feeding? What am I attracting? What is fueling me? Because if you are being fueled by fear, even if it gives you strength, it's not your strength. If you are being fueled by anger, even if it gives you clarity, it's not your clarity. It's a parasite. And the only way to free yourself is to starve it. Start choosing stillness over stimulation. Start choosing truth over comfort. Start choosing love over power. And yes, that sounds soft. It sounds naive. But only because we've been conditioned to believe that power is the highest goal. It's not. Presence is. Connection is. Alignment is. And here's the paradox. When you align with truth, with love, with light, you become infinitely more powerful than any dark chosen one. Because your power doesn't come from distortion. It comes from source. And source never runs dry. But you have to choose it. Every day, every thought, every action. You have to choose it when it's hard, when it costs you, when no one is watching. That's the real test. That's the real initiation. And most people fail it not because they're bad, but because they've forgotten. Forgotten who they are. Forgotten where they came from. Forgotten what they're here to do. So I leave you with this question. What vibration are you feeding right now? The hidden mechanics of demonic frequency, how darkness hooks into the human soul. When we talk about demonic vibrations, we're not just talking about something external. We're talking about a frequency that knows exactly how to enter your system, not by force, but by resonance. That's the dark genius of it. It doesn't need to knock down your door. It only needs to wait until the door is already cracked open from the inside. And that crack, it's almost always emotional. Pain, longing, shame. The unhealed wound is the gateway. And the darkness is patient. It whispers, it seduces. It mirrors your pain back to you in a way that makes you believe it understands you better than anyone else. And in that moment, you begin to trust it. That's the first hook. You see, the human soul is not just a passive container. It's a tuning fork. It vibrates, it harmonizes, it attracts. When your soul is vibrating in a state of disconnection, you unconsciously begin to seek anything that feels like connection, even if it's toxic, even if it's twisted, because the soul craves resonance more than safety. Think about that. That's how people fall into illusions, cults, addictions, abusive relationships, or power-hungry pursuits. Not because they're weak or stupid, but because, on some level, something inside them recognized the frequency. It felt familiar. It felt like home, but not a safe home, a haunted one. The demonic vibration doesn't always come in fangs and fire. Sometimes it comes in charisma, in beauty, in talent, in someone who seems to get you instantly, or in an opportunity that promises power, influence, control. But the price is always your center. The price is always your clarity. Once you align with it, even a little, it begins to reshape your perception. You stop asking, "Is this true?" and start asking, "Does this give me more? More control, more followers, more validation?" And slowly, without even realizing it, you become an echo of the very thing that hooked you. There's a technique to how these dark frequencies operate. They're not chaotic. They're precise, strategic. They identify your deepest longing, your secret wound, and they mimic the solution. If you crave love, they offer obsession. If you crave peace, they offer numbness. If you crave significance, they offer domination. And because the ego is easily fooled, you accept the counterfeit. That's how the hook goes deeper. And the more you feed the hook, the more your soul forgets what real nourishment feels like. Now, here's the real twist. The more you align with these frequencies, the more reality starts to confirm them. It's not just in your head. People really do start to treat you differently. You do start to win, to rise, to shine, but it's a false light, a spotlight, not sunlight. It burns you from the outside in. You become addicted to the performance. You become terrified of silence, because silence is where the truth lives. And if you sit in silence long enough, you'll start to hear the truth again. And that threatens the vibration that's been feeding on you. So how do you unhook? How do you break the spell? Not through willpower alone, not through denial or suppression. The only way to unhook is through conscious dissonance. You must begin to disrupt the resonance. You must introduce a higher frequency truth, love, humility, surrender into the system. And yes, it will feel foreign at first. It will feel awkward, even painful, because your nervous system has been tuned to darkness. But as you keep choosing light, your soul begins to remember. You begin to detox. You begin to realign. And the hooks one by one begin to lose their grip. But this process is not instant. It's not glamorous. And it's not always visible. In fact, it often looks like falling apart. Because the parts of you that were built on distortion have to crumble. The false confidence, the fake peace, the manipulative charm, they have to go. And what's left is raw, vulnerable, real. That's when many people turn back. That's when many say, maybe the darkness was better. But if you can hold through that fire, if you can stay when everything in you wants to run, you will find something the darkness could never give you: peace. Not the peace that numbs, but the peace that liberates. So I ask you, what frequency are you resonating with right now? Not what you say you believe, not what you post about, but what you feel when no one is watching. That feeling, that's the tuning. And if it's off, even just a little, you are vulnerable to the hook. But if you can tune yourself back to truth, even for a moment, you begin to break the system. You begin to become immune. Not because you're better, but because you're awake. And that's what the darkness fears most, not your strength, not your success, but your awakening. Because once you awaken, you can no longer be seduced. You can no longer be used. You become sovereign. And a sovereign soul is the one thing the dark vibration cannot consume. The rise and fall of the dark chosen, why their power always implodes. The story of every dark chosen one follows a pattern. It begins in obscurity, often in pain, exile, or deep emotional hunger. They rise fast, sometimes terrifyingly fast, but their presence becomes magnetic, their influence stretches beyond logic, and people begin to orbit around them like moons around a black sun. They seem untouchable, indestructible, and their confidence borders on prophecy. And we watch them. We admire them. Some of us fear them. But very few ever ask the real question: what is the cost of their power? Because power that is not rooted in truth cannot sustain itself. That is the sacred law of vibration. It doesn't matter how high you climb, if your ladder is leaning against illusion, it will collapse. The dark chosen ones often gain access to extraordinary abilities. They seem to read minds, bend outcomes, attract wealth and attention with minimal effort. But what we don't see, what most never see, is the internal erosion. The soul begins to rot long before the mask ever cracks. And by the time the fall becomes visible, it's already too late. The implosion has begun. But why does it always implode? Because dark power, by nature, feeds on separation. And separation, by nature, demands more of the self and less of the soul. The more they feed on this power, the more they must isolate emotionally, spiritually, energetically. They become surrounded by people, yet profoundly alone. They become praised, yet deeply insecure. They become elevated, but hollow. And the silence they once escaped now stalks them like a shadow. That silence, the one they refused to sit in, is where the truth lives. And the longer they avoid it, the louder it becomes, until one day it shatters everything. There's a moment in every dark chosen one's life when reality begins to rupture. It might come through scandal, through betrayal, through a sudden loss of influence or health or control. And from the outside it looks like karma, but from the inside it feels like madness. And the systems begin to break. The very energy that once empowered them begins to turn against them. Why? Because distortion never offers loyalty. It only offers leverage. And once your vibration no longer serves the dark current, it discards you. It strips you of the illusion it once used to seduce others through you. And this is the tragic part. Many of them don't know how to return. They've spent so long identifying with the power, with the persona, with the performance, that they no longer know who they are without it. And the soul, having been buried for so long under layers of control and denial, barely whispers anymore. And when it does, it sounds like guilt, like loss, like grief. And so they fight it. They double down. They try to rebuild the illusion, but the vibration has shifted. The resonance is gone, and without resonance there is only echo, an echo of what they once were. But not all are lost forever. Some fall hard, and in the ashes of their empire, they finally hear the truth. They finally face the silence they spent years running from. And in that silence, something breaks open. The ego dies. The persona collapses. And the soul, fragile, trembling, but still alive, begins to speak again. These are the rare ones. The ones who do not just fall, but awaken. The ones who rise again not as dark chosen ones, but as light bearers. Humbled, scarred, but finally whole. So ask yourself, if all your power was stripped away, your influence, your charm, your recognition, would you still know who you are? Would you still feel worthy? Would you still feel real? If the answer is no, then it means part of you has already been seduced. But that's not a curse. That's a calling. A call back to authenticity, back to source, back to your original vibration. Because the fall of the dark chosen is not just a warning. It is a mirror that asks, what are you building your life on? Love or illusion? Truth or performance? Soul or strategy? Reclaiming the throne of light, the warrior path of the awakened soul. When a soul breaks free from the grip of distorted vibration, it doesn't return to innocence, it steps into power. But not the kind of power the world glorifies. Not the loud, forceful, attention-hungry power. This power is quiet, steady, rooted. It doesn't seek to dominate, it seeks to illuminate. It doesn't hunger to be seen, it burns to see clearly. And this is the path of the true spiritual warrior, the one who has tasted darkness, danced with shadows, and chosen to rise anyway. Not as a savior, not as a saint, but as someone who remembers who they truly are. Reclaiming your throne of light is not about perfection. It's about alignment. It's about choosing what is real over what is easy, choosing presence over performance, choosing to tell the truth even when your voice shakes, because the awakened soul no longer chases vibration, it embodies it, and that embodiment becomes your shield. Then your clarity becomes your protection, your humility becomes your compass. That's what the dark vibration can never counterfeit. It can mimic charisma, it can mimic miracles, but it cannot mimic peace, real peace. The kind that comes when your inner world no longer betrays itself. You see, the warrior of light doesn't need everyone to agree. They don't need applause. They don't need to be liked. They burn through that. They faced the part of themselves that wanted to be worshipped, wanted to be needed, wanted to control, and they let it die. Not once, but again and again. Because on this path, the ego doesn't get destroyed in one glorious battle. It gets surrendered in 1,000 silent choices. And every time you choose soul over self-image, you reclaim a piece of your throne. But make no mistake, this path is not passive. It is active, fierce, relentless, because the world is still filled with noise, with illusions, with hooks disguised as opportunities. And if you do not stand guard over your vibration, you will be pulled back into the matrix. But that's why the awakened soul must become a warrior, not to fight others, but to protect their own alignment. This is the sacred discipline, the daily devotion, the moment-to-moment awareness. What am I feeding? What am I aligning with? This is where your real power lives. Not in your ability to manifest things, but in your ability to stay rooted when nothing is manifesting. Not in your ability to be seen, but in your willingness to be invisible, if that's what truth requires. That's the paradox. The more you surrender the hunger for power, the more power flows through you. The more you give up control, the more influence you carry. Not because you're trying, but because you become a vessel. And vessels don't perform, they transmit. And you, yes, you are being called to transmit something real, something holy. Not the kind of holiness that hides in robes and rituals, but the kind that stands in the middle of a broken world and says, I remember who I am. And that remembrance is your throne. That clarity is your sword. And that love is your legacy. The darkness cannot touch that, not truly. It can tempt you, it can distract you, but it cannot destroy who you are underneath the layers. So now, in this very moment, I ask you, are you ready to sit on your throne of light? Not tomorrow, not when you feel worthy, but now, as you are, flawed, raw, alive. Because the throne isn't waiting in some distant heaven. It's right here, in your next breath, your next choice, your next act of radical honesty. The world needs awakened souls who have walked through fire and returned with water. Souls who are not afraid to feel deeply, to speak truthfully, to love fiercely. Souls like you. So rise not as a savior, but as a mirror of what's possible. Rise not to prove anything, but to remember everything. Rise and reclaim the light that was never lost, only forgotten. You're not here to follow the path. You're here to be the path. And the path begins now.